Could mosasaurs survive in Subnautica? In the fourth episode of my most popular series on the channel, we're putting two types of mosasaurs into Sector 0 of Planet 4546b. The real species is Gnathomortis stadtmani, a 10.5 meter apex predator from the Cretaceous. The other is the absolutely gigantic Jurassic World mosasaur, which was a kaiju-sized movie monster. First up is Gnathomortis. We'll analyze how it handles the polar ocean of its new home, obtains food to satisfy its hunger, and competes with native ecological analogs and predators to deal with their hunger. At the end, we'll find out how Gnathomortis might evolve to fit into its alien surroundings, and then move to the Jurassic World monstrosity. Will they thrive, or be eaten alive? First off, we need to learn about Gnathomortis. It's not a very well-known mosasaur, but it's one of my favorites. The genus name means Jaws of Death, which is probably tied for the coolest mosasaur name ever, along with Jormungandr. Gnathomortis was split off from the more popular Prognathodon in 2020, and is a 10.5 meter, 34 foot super predator that lived in the western interior seaway of Cretaceous North America. It had a huge robust skull filled with large conical teeth, perfect for piercing and crushing prey, and would have had a powerful bite force. A huge thank you goes to Rod Scheetz and Tyler Luckau at the BYU Museum of Paleontology, who were kind enough to provide these photos and videos as reference material so I could make a reconstruction of the animal. There's pretty much no art of Gnathomortis, which I hope this video will change. The most important factor that Gnathomortis will need to confront, even before we get into specific biomes, is the climate of Sector 0. Is it even fair or fun to place a big aquatic lizard in a polar biome? The answer to both questions, as it turns out, is a resounding yes. A 2016 study found that mosasaurs were actually endothermic, and had metabolisms that more closely resembled those of pole-dwelling seabirds like Hesperornis than those of ectothermic fish they lived with. Hesperornis lived as far north as Ellesmere Island, which is off the northwest coast of Greenland today, and was still quite cold in the Cretaceous period. Based on the success of large-bodied carnivorous vertebrates in Sector 0 like the Cryptosuchus, we don't see the temperature of the water causing significant issues for Gnathomortis. They could also move rather quickly. A 2013 biomechanical study concluded that mosasaurs, thanks to their powerful pectoral and caudal fins, could move at speeds comparable to modern pelagic sharks. That lines up well with prehistoric planets analysis, which supports the idea of extremely fast-moving mosasaurs that could ram into prey and one another as a form of stunning attack. And gee, researching all these different studies at once can be a lot to manage. That's where Opera, today's sponsor, comes into the picture. Opera is a free internet browser that comes equipped with heavy-duty tools that help me organize my research without getting overwhelmed. I like using its built-in AI tool Aria to help keep all of my tabs in order. I just hit a quick shortcut to open the command line and ask Aria to pin, save, or group my tabs. And with just one click, Aria groups all my tabs into their own little tab islands. Now I can keep my Tyrannosaur research over here, Subnautica biome information over here, and Mosasaur studies over here. Opera even keeps track of which tabs I've used most recently with the Tab Traces feature. The darker the underline, the more recently I've used it. That way, I don't have to guess and search through 50 different tabs before I remember what I was just working on. I can even work on multiple projects at a time with split screen. All I have to do is drag my screen down and voila, 2 screens at the same time. Nothing like reading about mosasaur biomechanics on one half of the screen while taking notes on speculative evolution designs on the second half. Opera's also great for keeping the atmosphere of your workspace interesting with its pop-out music player, which lets you control your music without having to switch tabs or windows. I can even move it beyond the browser, so I don't need extra apps just to listen to my tunes. You can even pop out videos so you can watch YouTube and work at the same time. I promise it helps with productivity, but only if you watch Vividen videos. You can click the link in the description to download Opera for free today. We're starting off with the shallow Twisty Bridges biome. It's, well, shallow, from sea level to 40 meters below the surface. With complex rock formations, huge slabs of coral, and dappled sunlight, it's a protected nursery area for Gnathomortis young. There are no animals here that would pose threats to our visiting mosasaurs, but there certainly are potential prey items. Arctic peepers are a classic symbol of the below zero game, and are decently calorie dense. Bladderfish are less nutritious, but easier to catch. Wholefish represent a deceptively small protein source thanks to their hollow insides, while the coral-eating boomerangs are large enough to perhaps be the best choice in the biome. At 10.5 meters and several tons, Gnathomortis is large enough to lord it over the area, but small enough that it can actually navigate the shallows without issue. If we brought, say, 50 breeding adults, 25 male and 25 female, they'd probably treat this area like their mating and/or breeding grounds. It's a great spot to keep their young away from harm, with the possible exception of cannibalistic mosasaurs. You never know when Aunt Tina's gonna snap. Oh, and I should mention this. In Subnautica, biomes tend to be incredibly small, without sufficient resources to realistically support the amount of megafauna that usually live there. We can chalk that up to video game logic, in which case the mosasaurs will follow the same rules and just be okay somehow, or food here is incredibly dense in calories, which doesn't seem to make sense given how quickly the human player can starve to death. Perhaps we can look at each large animal as being representative of a population, and the biomes we see in-game are representations of much larger ecosystems. Adventurous Gnathomortis could quickly find themselves in the deep twisty bridges, an area with much less light and a lot more hydrothermal vents. It goes as far down as 480 meters and takes the form of a meandering cave system. Mosasaurs generally don't appear to have had much adaptation for low-light environments, and so probably wouldn't spend much time here. That is especially true when considering that the only real food items in the deep twisty bridges are the spinefish, barely large enough for Gnathomortis to notice, and triops, which are small invertebrates named for the triops found on Earth. If that wasn't enough reason not to frequent the area, we find squid sharks, 11-meter carnivorous beauties with fast swimming capabilities and flexible arm-like jaws. If it came down to a fight, Gnathomortis would be big and fierce enough to kind of hold its own, but there really isn't anything worth fighting over to begin with. The quest for more suitable environments continues while the babies are growing large back in the shallows. The Arctic kelp forest seems chill. The strands of creep vines are dense, tall, and thickly distributed, making it a good hiding place for young mosasaurs before they get big enough to challenge Sector Zero's native predators. It's also close to the surface, providing easy access to air that mosasaurs, as animals with lungs, would need. Its maximum depth of 150 meters is well within the comfort zone of mosasaurs, although they'd likely focus on staying close to the bright, shallow areas. What's more, there aren't any large predators here, so that niche's apex is wide open for the taking. We have Arctic peepers and boomerangs, which we saw previously, and would be great for young Gnathomortis to go after. Larger prey items begin to appear as well, including the hobbit-sized penguins and their young, pinnacarids, which are essentially seals, and sea monkeys, which are a terror in-game and I hope all get eaten by mosasaurs. Prognathodon, a close relative of Gnathomortis, is known to have preyed on medium-sized armored prey like big turtles, so the high density of human-sized animals in the kelp forest would provide plenty of nutrition. Man, it is so much easier to feed a 10-meter mosasaur than it is a 20-meter megalodon or 25-meter pliosaur. I should do more small animals in future episodes, shouldn't I? On to the sparse Arctic, which is really not a great place for air-breathing animals to spend a lot of time since it's almost entirely covered with ice. Titan wholefish, although they'd be good food options if you can get past the swarms of bitey symbiotes that protect them, would be more useful once the mosasaurs realize that you can get oxygen by getting close to them. Lizards generally are not stupid animals, least of all the varanids that mosasaurs are believed to be closely related to, and I don't imagine it would take them all that long to figure this out. Arctic peepers would be snacks for babies, and the presence of penguins indicates that air-breathing animals can still be fairly active here as long as they can easily access air sources. Brine wings represent a unique challenge. Physically, they're unimposing and would likely offer calories enough to be worth it normally, but their ability to flash freeze whatever's in front of them would immediately convince Gnathomortis to leave them alone. If there's easier prey nearby, there's no reason to bother with a brine wing. Thermal spires fill the, thermal spires. This biome, down to 280 meters below sea level, is filled with mineral and nutrient-rich hydrothermal vents that have gradually precipitated into towers that fill the biome. There are 3 animals I'd consider as consistent food sources. Arctic peepers, because of course, boomerangs thanks to their larger size, and featherfish, which are basically biscuits. Rock punchers are cow-sized invertebrates that look like mantis shrimp on steroids, and can in fact punch through solid rock as their name implies. Its armor is so strong that only Leviathan-class predators are able to pierce it, which isn't great news for Gnathomortis. They'd want to avoid rock punchers as much as possible. Cretaceous is the first true competition for the apex predator niche since the squid shark a few biomes ago. Heavily armored and slow, with wicked teeth and spiked scales, Cretaceous is a 9.5-meter brawler. However, they also avoid conflict and will quickly flee if attacked, so being confronted by faster, bigger, more agile opponents may cause them to back down if it comes to a contest over food sources. Overall, the thermal spires aren't really worth it for the mosasaurs, thanks to the small food options and the presence of somewhat dangerous native competitors. The Arctic is actually 2 biomes in one, split between east and west. They're both dense in icebergs on the surface, which somewhat limits access to air. The west iceberg zone has plenty of open space otherwise, along with lots of food. That list includes our favorite, Arctic peepers, along with Arctic rays, which, unlike their crater relatives, do not appear to be poisonous. Bladderfish and boomerang join the roster. Eye jellies are strange newcomers, and while they may look soft and edible, they'll emit a dangerous shock if you get too close. One wonders if they're relatives of the southern crab squids, which have a similar defense mechanism. Penguins and their adult forms, penguins, are great snacks for mosasaurs. They're fast but not uncatchable and provide enough calories to be worth the effort. The same goes for pinnacarids. Rock grubs are small invertebrates, and baby mosasaurs could easily snap them up like popcorn. Finally, Titan wholefish appear in the West Iceberg Zone and would be most useful for the oxygen they provide rather than calories. Just watch out for their snappy symbiotes. The East Iceberg Zone, if I may say so, is the best option for mosasaurs we've yet discussed. Not only is there plenty of open water between the icebergs to allow for air-breathing animals to thrive, but the food profile is phenomenal. We've got all the same tasty critters as the West Iceberg Zone, but with the addition of a crucial factor, the glow whale. These are 30-meter buffets for mosasaurs, given their extremely slow movement and lack of defensive weaponry. Their fins and tails are thin and delicate, not exactly useful for slapping around potential predators, and with no teeth to speak of, they can't bite back. They're also quite common in the area. There's only one potential issue with the East Iceberg Zone, and that's the resident apex predator, the chelicerate that lurks on its borders. This might be a hot take, but I absolutely adore the chelicerate's design. It's like if a camel spider had a baby with a monstrous barracuda. I know it isn't nearly as popular as the crater biome's Reaper Leviathan, but I might actually like the aesthetics more. Anyway, the chelicerate has powerful grasping, chelicerae, which it can use to seize its prey and chew it to bits. It's also a massive animal, at 40 meters long. That's longer than the largest hypothetically possible blue whale, although it likely isn't as massive since it's less robust proportionally. Even so, I'd be shocked if the chelicerate was less than 100 tons, considering it's covered in chitinous plate armor. It's also a fast swimmer when it wants to be, capable of outpacing the sea truck, which moves at 9.18 meters per second without any upgrades. That's 20 miles an hour or 35 kilometers an hour. So while the chelicerate certainly has the power and weaponry to one-shot a Gnathomortis and the armor to ignore attacks from one, could it catch one? Based on the research team for Prehistoric Planet calculating that large mosasaurs could accelerate to 30 miles an hour in the span of a single second by folding their bodies into a C shape and then exploding outward, I'll say no. The mosasaurs aren't doing a dang thing to the chelicerate, but it likely won't have much luck in harming them either. If anything, their high burst speed ambush tactics might get to the glow whales before it could, starving it out of its own home. The lily pad islands represent a similar environment to the Arctic in terms of diet and competition. Glow whales would remain the chief food source here, supplemented by access to not-to-scale, bladderfish, boomerang, featherfish, hoopfish, sea monkeys, and spinnerfish. New prey include lily paddlers, which resemble gigantic leafy sea dragons, newtfish, which are essentially edible trumpets, and brute sharks. Brute sharks are powerful predators in most contexts, but at less than half the length and a quarter the mass of an adult Gnathomortis are better prey options than they are real competition. There aren't any chelicerates here, but squid sharks are the native apexes. At 11 meters long, they're a bit longer than Gnathomortis and are also a bit bulkier, with formidable machete-like fangs and an electrical attack that could stun any overconfident mosasaurs. I don't see any Gnathomortis choosing to mess with a squid shark, given the size difference and electrical blast factor, so while the mosasaurs would certainly be successful here, they wouldn't be able to become the apex predator. The purple vents is a bit of a wasteland biome, covered with barren rock formations and hydrothermal vents. The menu is similarly sparse. Bladderfish are gristly and small, and featherfish don't exactly offer a rich spread of calories either. Crashfish might look tasty if you're into that sort of thing, but if you get too close, they'll explode in your face. That would be enough to take out Gnathomortis young and seriously injure adults. And if the food being bad wasn't enough of an annoyance, you have to deal with both a horde of Cryptosuchus and a chelicerate. There isn't anything here worth fighting over though, so time to move on. The tree spires are our final biome before we get into the speculative evolution section. It's also covered in hydrothermal vents, but these ones are much prettier. Thanks to the coral and marine plants that cover them, they do resemble trees, hence the name of the biome. Food options here include brute sharks, hoopfish, and red featherfish. In theory, mosasaurs could attack juvenile vent garden leviathans, but it seems more likely that they'd see them as toys. They might treat adult vent garden leviathans as protective nurseries for their young, showing them how to hide from chelicerates inside of the living mini ecosystems. Unfortunately, as cool of an idea as that is, the tree spires simply don't have the food required to sustain a population of fast, active endothermic superpredators like Gnathomortis. They won't be spending much time here, if any. That brings us to our Thrive Rate and Alive score. Home is our first category. We saw Gnathomortis' need for air prevent it from venturing into the deeper biomes, but there were plenty of other options. The twisty bridges were great, with room to maneuver and easy access to the ocean surface. The same goes for the Arctic kelp forest, which provided shelter for young mosasaurs along with plenty of room for adults. The iceberg zones and lily pad islands also provided ideal habitats, and as discussed earlier, the cold shouldn't be much of a problem given mosasaurs' high metabolic rate and sheer size. However, many biomes didn't have enough resources or access to air to be worth staying in long term, like the thermal zones or anywhere deeper than a couple hundred meters. Overall, we give Gnathomortis a 6 for its home score. Hunger is next, and again this varies significantly from biome to biome. Some areas, like the Purple Vents, barely had any food at all, while others, like the East Iceberg Zone and Lilypad Islands, had glow whales. Those virtually defenseless giants would definitely become the main food source for the Gnathomortis population, with important supplementary food items in the form of penguins and pinnacarids. There are enough types of random small fish to keep the babies fed and happy, so in multiple biomes we have a full food web. That's a 7 for hunger. Hunger is the final category to determine Gnathomortis' success in Sector 0. Just as with the other two categories, competition and predation threats vary heavily depending on the biome. In the shallow twisty bridges, for example, there's not much to speak of. Sector 0 is a high-risk, high-reward environment, chelicerates and squid sharks popping up where you can find glow whales. But those are really the only two predators that the mosasaurs are likely to frequently encounter. Sure, you have other random giant carnivores like the shadow leviathan, but that's way down in the crystal caverns where it will likely never confront an air-breathing surface-hunting mosasaur. Brute sharks are meals rather than threats, and Cryptosuchus are cowards that look scary but will avoid actual confrontations like the Kara virus. If a mosasaur went fin-to-fin with a squid shark, it would be at a disadvantage, and would get absolutely destroyed by a chelicerate. But Gnathomortis would likely learn quickly that their own biggest competition is each other. Let's give them a 7. They're doing well, able to find their own niche, but aren't becoming the new apex predator by any means. That's an average of 6.66 out of 10, with 5 being the minimum for maintaining a stable population. It looks like mosasaurs, despite the cold and alien fauna, would be closer to thriving than being eaten alive. But it's time for your favorite part. How would Gnathomortis, a 10-meter mosasaur from Earth, develop into a Subnautica creature? The first spec evo variant is the Gnathodonta carcinophagus, the tooth-jaw crab eater. As its name implies, it enjoys eating crustaceans, or aliens that look like crustaceans. Specifically, this mosasaur has developed a large, wide skull and peg-like teeth reminiscent of Earth's globidens. What for, you may ask? Why, all the better to crush rock punchers with. The carcinophage heard that only leviathans could hunt rock punchers and took that personally. Its bite is so strong that it can crush solid rock itself, enabling it to overpower the rock puncher's incredibly durable armor, especially when factoring in the extra pressure from their palatine teeth. Carcinophages also have highly durable skin themselves, especially in the front of the body, since the crab-like animals they hunt don't take kindly to being eaten. They average 11 meters in length and weigh 7 tons when fully grown, and roam around the Arctic and thermal spires to prey on their stomatopod-like victims. The second is Leosphonius ferox, the fierce light murderer. Leosphonius are slightly larger than their ancestors, comparable to Mosasaurus hoffmanni at 12 meters and around 10 tons. Their counter-shaded scales are highly reflective, allowing them to imitate glow whales' bioluminescent signals at a distance. They also engage in pack hunting, typically living in groups of 3 to 5 adults who are teaching their young how to hunt. They utilize their natural camouflage to get close to glow whales without spooking them, sensing their sounds with a thick pad of fat on their snouts, and then leap into an ambush from all sides. Now, you may have realized that one Leosphonius by itself would be enough to take on a glow whale. That's correct. The pack hunting developed as a method to intimidate predators of similar size, like squid sharks, and to encourage chelicerates not to hone in on their kills. Once a pack has taken down a glow whale, they're able to take turns feeding and standing guard to prevent a chelicerate from trying to raid the carcass. 3 adults are usually enough to nip at the chelicerate's fins and spines, irritating it enough that it doesn't consider stealing the kill to be worth the inconvenience. As the young mature, they gradually participate in more and more whale hunts until they're able to hold their own as fully fledged members, at which point they may leave to find mates and start their own packs. Light murderer packs are matrilineal, and it's usually the young males that leave upon reaching adulthood. The third spec evo variant is a Gnatophysiphogor vigilis, a mouthful of a scientific name that just means lightning suction watcher. Altera researchers typically refer to them by the informal name lightning suckers, referencing these mosasaurs' adaptations for speed and suction feeding of small animals. They're much smaller than Gnathomortis. Adults average 6 meters long and weigh 1 metric ton, comparable to great white sharks. They've developed streamlined bodies, long caudal fins, and thin skulls, with a high degree of fast-twitch muscle fibers that enable them to reach burst speeds of 40 miles an hour or 64 kilometers an hour. Their small-toothed jaws have a severely receded elastic mandibular symphysis, along with an elongated split premaxilla and maxilla that allow them to rapidly and forcefully expand their mouths, sucking fish and microorganisms into their throats directly like a pelican. Lightning suckers can be found pretty much everywhere across Sector 0. They're much faster than any potential predators and can thrive on small organisms, allowing some populations to even live in the ecological dead zones and feed on the microscopic life found there. They're not hostile to humans and will even allow Alterran representatives to approach. All that is well and good and is normally where I'd end the video, but today I wanted to do something extra special. How would the Jurassic World mosasaur perform in Sector 0? This beastie is infamous in the Jurassic World series as the undisputed top tier of the verse. It ate the Indominus Rex, which required the combined effort of Blue and Rexy to overpower, and is completely unbothered by all of the events of the following films. It's also infamous for changing sizes between shots. The official website lists it as 16 meters long, which is already bigger than the largest known mosasaur from the actual fossil record, but on film it's laughably larger. By Fallen Kingdom it dwarfs humpback whales, with some shots having it as over 80 meters long. That's bigger than the majority of Leviathan-class organisms in both Subnautica games, and twice the size of the Chelicerate. So what would a kaiju like this even eat? Considering that its bite was powerful enough to crush a metal submarine in the prologue of Fallen Kingdom, I'd say that the answer is whatever it wants. At maximum size, its jaws alone are about 12 meters long, which would let it swallow a squid shark whole. That's 2 bites for a glow whale, and it could rip a Chelicerate in half with a single strike. While it's not quite as long as the iceworm Leviathan, it's likely comparable in muscle mass given their proportions. It doesn't always go on a rampage though, or we would have seen it attack a lot more people and whales in the film series. Vent gardens are likely safe, given how they don't resemble its normal prey. Brute sharks are close to what the mosasaur was raised on when it lived in the functioning Jurassic World, so it might eat them preferentially. Cryptosuchus's armor won't protect it, as the mosasaur handily disposed of the Indominus, which had a bullet-resistant hide. The Shadow Leviathan is safe, if only because the Jurassic World menace probably wouldn't be able to access the crystal caverns. Any snow stalkers near the shoreline would need to be extremely careful. The Void Chelicerate is a much better matchup. At 65 meters long, it's about 80% the length of a Fallen Kingdom mosasaur and has some serious weaponry along with its bulk. Those 4 razor-sharp serrated mandibles could definitely do damage to its reptilian nemesis. That being said, there isn't really a reason for the mosasaur to leave Sector 0, since here is where the food is. It would mainly lurk around the Lily Pad Islands, East Iceberg Zone, and possibly the Purple Vents, chomping down on glow whales and predatory Leviathan-class organisms, secure in the knowledge that nothing near it could harm it. Instead of a speculative evolution section for the Jurassic World mosasaur, I'll be imitating what Madly Mesozoic did with his Archagiga and Monster Hunter video. These next 2 designs don't represent alternative paths of evolution, but rather how the mosasaur would be integrated into Subnautica as if it were part of the game from the beginning. First up is the Icebreaker Leviathan. This mosasaur-like creature is found patrolling across the sparse Arctic and between both iceberg zones, lurking in deeper, murky water before ambushing large prey. It will happily attack the player, especially if you're in vehicles like the Sea Truck, but focuses on ripping through icebergs to catch groups of snowstalkers, pinnacarids, and penguins, swimming from below the ice and stunning its victims with the force of the impact. The bony ram on its face is considered a valuable resource for building mining material, given its unique cryovolcanium structure that makes it harder than diamond, as well as its ability to produce extreme heat. Its protective osteoderms are made from the same incredible substance. The Icebreaker Leviathan uses it to dig through the ice of the Arctic spires to find iceworm tunnels and eat their inhabitants, opening the islands to the ocean and creating entirely new sub-biomes in its wake. If it's scanned, the player will find out that the icebreaker measures 112 meters long and is calculated to weigh nearly 10,000 metric tons. I mentioned earlier that the Jurassic World mosasaur infamously changed sizes between shots. This creature, available only in mods created by truly insane players, represents the ridiculous oversizing committed by the Jurassic World franchise. I present to you the Deep Famine Leviathan, the inevitable result of the monsterization of prehistoric animals. The Deep Famine Leviathan resembles a mosasaur in overall body shape, but is speculated to resemble a common ancestor between the squid shark and gargantuan leviathan. It's 740 meters long, with a mass of 2.8 million tons, and its muscle density is such that it can move at nearly 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers an hour even at that size. It eats void chelicerates and adult ghost leviathans, given how the ecological dead zone is the only place in the known games that can fit its tremendous form. It snatches them with its rapid-fire tentacles, which lurch out of its throat pouch and snare prey. Why on earth does it have teeth then, you may ask, and why is it so darn big? The Deep Famine is the territorial rival of the gargantuan leviathan, representing the short and strong build versus the long and sleek build. Adults of these two frequently clash in the open ocean, causing tsunamis with their blows. The gargantuan tries to strangle its enemy, while the deep famine maneuvers itself for an effective bite. No matter which colossus wins, the ecosystem loses. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this analysis of mosasaurs in Subnautica Below Zero. Don't forget to click the link in the description to download Opera for free. Subscribe for more videos like this, and check out the other Subnautica videos I've already done. What other prehistoric animals would you like to be thrown into the oceans of Planet 4546b? Feel free to join the channel for exclusive perks like loyalty badges and shoutouts at the Raptor tier, with additional early access to videos at the Megatheropod tier. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time a prehistoric monster becomes a Leviathan Eater.